Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums, as well as Top 10 Songs of Joni Mitchell in the co-captain's chair once again. Mr. Grant Arthur from Grant's Rock Warehouse and the Contrarians. What's happening, my friend?
Hey, Pete, nice to see you. Glad to be here. It's a beautiful day, and it's
Beautiful day.
always a good day to talk
Grant and,
Joni Mitchell.
Grant and I have been up YouTubing all morning because we just did that wonderful show, which hopefully you guys caught last night, where we talked about why we do this whole content creation thing with a
Mhm.
bunch of other like-minded folks. And now we're here to do Joni Mitchell. We're going to give you a little bit of twist on the Ranking the Album show, because basically what we're going to do is I'm going to rank my top 10 albums of Joni Mitchell. Grant is going to rank his top 10 songs, because I think this is an artist that sometimes people think the songs are more important than the albums and vice versa. So we're going to give you both.
Mhm.
Right. So that's what we're going to do. So she's got a lot of albums. She's got a
A
lot of
lot of
singles, a
records.
lot of stuff. Yeah, a lot of stuff, a lot of different types of music that she's done over the years. Of course, Joni, long known as one of the great folk, rock, jazz pop singer songwriters, Laurel Canyon chicks, right? Who've been around, legendary performer. She's had relationships with some of the great rock stars of our time, and lots of history here. Gigantic bugs flying all over the place here. What is going on with that? I don't know. I try to ignore those. My puppy's going to be running back and forth, back and forth. She's out here with me. But anyway, so a lot of stuff in the catalog. So since we're doing 10 of
Yeah.
both albums and songs, we're gonna do two at a time. So I'll
Mhm.
give my bottom two albums. Grant will give his bottom two songs. We'll go back and forth, back and forth. So that's how we're gonna work this particular one. So you guys are getting like double the content for the price of one, right?
That's the way we do it.
The way we roll,
Well,
right?
this is a cool concept, Pete, because
Cool content.
okay, and this is the perfect artist in which to do this because she's so established. She's considered one of the greatest songwriters ever. Her and Neil Young probably right up there. Um, she's put out a ton of records, and like Neil, there's some records that might not date as well. And I think in our rankings, you might see more songs from a certain era, or some albums won't show up. But it's kind of really what we're trying to do here is turn you on to Joni Mitchell,
Yeah.
and why not look at the songs, look at the records, and yeah, you like you said, we're giving like a 2 for 1.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the cool thing about doing an artist like Joni Mitchell, and I'm as guilty as anybody for kind of pigeonholing her in one style of music for most of my life, thinking, that's not really for me. That's that kind of like folky stuff, right? Whatever. Man, amazing musicianship on some of these albums and great vocal harmonies and arrangements and all this stuff. And then she's got this whole jazz period, which speaks to me, right? So, spoiler alert, you're going to see a lot of that stuff in my ranking. So,
but it's but Pete, it's absolutely brilliant stuff.
yeah,
And
it
think
is.
about, but okay, we can talk about it, but think about a lot of that era and the musicians that she brought into the fold. I don't really remember anybody really doing anything like that because these guys that she brought in, well, some of the players, Larry
You could
Carlton
maybe
played
say
on Steely
Steely Dan,
Dan.
right? I was just
Yeah,
going to say you can maybe say Steely Dan, but yeah, if you at the rosters of some of these albums, just like it's like a who's who, and we're talking from like maybe 72 all the way to the mid 80s. Just look at people appearing on these albums, like, oh, I know that person, that person, that person, that person, that person, and they come from
yeah.
genres that you wouldn't think fit in with the music of Joni Mitchell, but that's the brilliance of it, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. All
Top
right. So what do you
notch.
think? Should we start with the songs or the albums? Does it really matter? I mean, who should
I doesn't matter. Whatever you want to do.
All right, I'll start with my bottom two, my number 10 and 9 albums.
Okay.
So I don't have this one, but it's my number 10. It's from 1988. It's her album Chalk Mark in a Rainstorm. Chalk Mark in a Rainstorm. Her 13 album, like I mentioned, tons of guests. It's kind of so one thing you gotta understand when it comes to Joni Mitchell, her music in the 80s is way different than the music in the 70s. So like it still sounds like Joni Mitchell, some of it, but all those like wonderful acoustic guitar textures and that little jazzy touch and the folky touch kind of replaced by synth pop and 80s production values and things like that. I find a lot of those 80s albums are kind of hard to take. I like this album, though. I think it's pretty good. She does a duet with Peter Gabriel on My Special Place. Really good song. She does a song with Billy Idol and Tom Petty called Dancing Clown. That's kind of interesting. There's some, kind of dreamy pop things like Beat It Black Wings. Lakota's a kind of a catchy song. You got straight up synth pop like Doggy, which is a little bit similar to Dog Eat Dog, which was the album before. But I think that this album is good for what it is. It's just if you kind of grew up and really loved that kind of folky acoustic artistry and jazzy pop of the prior decade, you're not really going to get a lot of that here on this particular album. But from of the 80s albums, I think I like this one the most. So that's my number 10.
You know what? I was going to make a quick point about that because her career is a lot like Neil Young to some degree.
Yeah.
Look, she's embracing the technology. She's trying to be modern. She's doing what she wants to do. It's like Neil doing trans, which came out of left field. Well, you kind of look at this record too, kind of coming out of left field. Now, probably alienated a lot of fans.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she's one of those true artists that just wants to create and embrace things like, very much like Neil.
Yeah.
So.
And you got to wonder how many new fans she brought on board with this album. The album came before it. People who never listened to her in the 70s, right? It's
Right.
very possible because she really wasn't doing anything all that much different in the 80s than what a lot of other artists were doing.
Right.
So, all right. My number 9 is Don Juan's Reckless Daughter from 1977, ninth album,
Yeah.
double album. Very experimental, very jazzy. I mean, this is out there. You got like most of Weather Reports on here. You got Jaco Pastorius, Wayne Shorter, and Alex Acuna, Don Elias. You got also Manolo Badrena's on here. Ayerto Moriera, Larry Carlton, John Guerin on drums. I mean, it's got a who's who of the jazz and fusion scene on here. Very atmospheric. You got Overture, Cotton Avenue. It's kind of very jazzy, great bass from Jaco. Talk to Me, Jericho, also really good stuff. It's just this atmospheric jazzy pop stuff. But you got some of these longer tracks on here. You got the 10th World, which is this percussion extravaganza, which could have been on a Santana album. That's very, very cool. What else? Off Night Backstreet, another cool jazz pop kind of folky type thing. But I mean, one thing you got to understand, folks, if you're watching these couple of albums that have Jaco Pastorius on it, I mean, he's the star of the show here. He's like, it's like she's singing, he's doing the all this kind of, and it works. And it's
But
like
the
I don't know if I've ever
combination,
heard.
that combination between Larry Carlton, Jaco, and her, and because don't forget, she's playing acoustic guitar on these, and she pretty much tunes to an open tuning. So,
Yes.
and she uses different tunings like David Crosby would do. So a lot of this stuff's really kind of, I don't want to say it's really out there because it's kind of accessible, but then it's just, I don't even know how to really classify
It's
it.
way more experimental than straight pop or folk.
Correct.
You're on the right track because her guitar work is exceptional on these albums.
Phenomenal.
But the way you kind of said it before, she's doing all this stuff, and then you got Jaco there, and then you got Larry Carlton kind of comping and doing these like light little licks in the background. He's not doing these big extravaganza solos like he does with Steely Dan. But it's really cool to hear. And I'm like, wow, this is like out there stuff. This I would say out of all the albums she did during her jazz period with these guys we're talking about, this is probably the least accessible. This is very adventurous. It was her last, I think, album for Asylum too. So she wanted to kind of throw everything in it. So, but it's still really, really good. And there's some really good stuff on here. So yeah, but it's my number 9. Great material. It's kind of long, kind of rambling in spots, but still really, really good. So that's my number 9. And let's hear your first 2 songs.
All right. So when I'm doing these rankings, I think like my top 4 maybe, and we've talked about this before when we do rankings on these albums. A lot of these records can change around, but this is what I'm going to go with. I think my top 10 tracks probably would be a good sampling of her material. If you're trying to look into Joni, you want to get turned on to it. I think that maybe these are probably a good representation. My number 10, I'm going to go with Woodstock from the Ladies of the Canyon album from 1970. Now, this version's a bit way different because everybody's familiar with the
Really?
Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young version. The beauty of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, I probably going to give Stephen Stills a lot because Steve and Still was really a lot of the drive in CSNY or CSN. he was able to take basically a folk song. She played this on like a Fender Rhodes, something in that. It's not just piano, but it's like a Fender Rhodes, I
Yeah,
think.
it's
It could, it sounds like a Rhodes, but it's just her at the Fender Rhodes just playing and singing, and it's not quite as accessible as you would get like on a Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young album. But they were able to take this song and actually make it a hit. But hers is way more experimental, more moody, more
very
oh,
atmospheric. Yes.
very atmospheric, almost eerie. She didn't get to go to Woodstock. She was dating, Graham Nash at the time, and basically wrote a song about what he told her, you know? So it's really great. It's just about peace, freedom, communal living. It's just hits all those things. But I think it's great. Her version is just very different than the Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young one, which is more commercial.
Yep.
Great. And you know what? I want to make a point. A lot of my picks are kind of stripped down. I like it when Joni has a stripped down sound, when she's like just playing acoustic guitar, playing piano, or she's playing the dulcimer, which I really like because the dulcimer gives it yet a different tonal, what would I want to say? It just gives it a different a feeling to it, you know? We'll get through it. We'll get there. But there's so much to talk about. It's hard to do it in 10. Um, my number 9, I'm going to go with an album. And like Pete just talked about, we might be seeing this record. I bet this is in his top 10. I haven't seen his list, but we're talking from the album Hajira. We're going to go with the title track, 1976, for All for Eight studio album. I mean, it means it's an Arabic word. It means journey or migration. This is one of those records that this is the album before Don Juan, and this is a bit more accessible. You've got pretty much the same lineup with this record. You've got Jocko, you've got um, uh, Brain. What's his name? Larry Carlton
Eric Cole.
on
Yeah.
just top-notch jazz musicians, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. It's very introspective. It explores themes of solitude, freedom, search for meaning. A lot of these Joni Mitchell albums are very deep, you know, and she produced it. It sounds great. I mean, I'd say it's a perfect blend of jazz, rock, folk influences. You put them all together, and that's what you get. But the songwriting on this, I think, is absolutely stunning. And Jocko's bass
Oh, so good.
is one of the distinctive features of this song because it's so predominant. It kind of goes back and forth between her vocals and the interplay between the guitars. Uh, Larry Carlton's doing the guitar part. It's very complicated. It's very jazzy. It's just you almost really have to listen to this to really understand it because it's really kind of hard to describe unless you hear it. It's so
That's this
cutting
whole
edge.
catalog, right? That's this whole catalog. It's very
She's
hard.
always been that way.
Yeah, yeah.
But check it out. I'll be interested to see where Pete, if this pops up in his ranking, because I will say, if I was doing a ranking, this particular album would be, well, I would say I'd probably be my number 3 or number 2. So anyway,
More on that.
Pete,
More on that
more
later,
on that
as
later.
we say. As we say. Number 8, Ladies of the Canyon. All right, 1973 album. Recorded this while living in Laurel Canyon. She's in a relationship with Graham Nash. She's singing here, playing guitars, playing keyboards. You got a couple guests. This is a very stripped back album, but really, really good. You got a couple guests on like flute, cello, and sax and whatnot. For free, great haunting track. You hit on something really good. That whole voice, piano,
Yep.
maybe guitar type of thing. It's very bare and like naked. I don't know any other way to describe it. Some of her stuff is like that. It's like so stripped back, but that's like the joy of it. You mentioned Woodstock. I mean, yeah, it's just her and electric piano. It's just totally different, totally haunting. Conversation is kind of wispy. Um, Great guitar patterns on this album. Like
Yeah.
like we talked about before, she's a really good acoustic guitar player, and all these weird tunings and all this complicated chords and stuff. Really good. Circle Game is the last track on here. You got the full Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young band singing backing vocals, just a really lush folk song. Really good album. It's my number 8. My number 7, which might be a favorite for a lot of people. I like it a lot. It's not quite my favorite, and that's Blue, the 4th album. Again, the album cover perfectly tells you what.
Wait a minute. You said that's number 7?
Number 7, yeah. Yeah, I know. Most people would have this really high up. I like
Well,
it.
I'll go on record because since I'm not doing the records, but I might as well make a comment.
That's your
That
number 1,
is
right?
my number 1.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's brilliant, perfect record.
Yep. Yep. And Joni vocals, guitar, dulcimer, piano. Stephen Stills is on here. James Taylor is on here. All I Want, My Old Man, Little Green, all these charming light folk songs, right? Catchy and quirky. Carrie, California, great song. That pulls you right in. Pulls you right in. And I want to, you talked about it on your other song. You talked about Woodstock and how different that is from the remake of it. How about This Flight Tonight, which most people probably know as that rockin' Nazareth song? Like, oh, that's right. Nazareth covered Joni Mitchell. Go listen to This Flight Tonight off of this album and then listen to the Nazareth version of it. It's completely different. You wouldn't even tell it's the same song. It's crazy. River is great. Last Time I Saw Richard is really poignant. I think that, what's interesting about this album, it's a very personal album. So if you read the history of this time period in her life, she is like at the end of her relationship with Graham Nash, and she's devastated by that. And then she's in a current thing with James Taylor, who she's fallen in love with, but he's got his own baggage, right? And then like the next album after this is kind of like goes into the whole breaking up with James Taylor. He's on heroin. He breaks her heart. I mean, you almost like feel like you're in the middle of all this stuff here. It's crazy, right? The love life of this woman.
She's the 70s Taylor Swift.
She
writes all these albums about these relationships.
Exactly. It's crazy. So, but that's what makes them what they are, right? So, but yeah, really good album. I think if you want the more kind of lush, stripped back, very, very personal Joni Mitchell, this is an easy recommendation. I like some of the jazzier stuff a little bit more, but this, like I said, Grant having it as his number 1, I totally get that. I'm sure a lot of people would. So anyway, your next 2 songs.
Okay. I'm going to go with a song that was a big hit single for her, 1974 off of Court and Spark. I'm going to go with Help Me, which was a big hit. It was her most commercially successful song. Yeah. And then again, it's dealing with romantic relationships, the joy, the anxiety, everything. That's what she sings about. But she's able to sing about it in kind of an upbeat way. So if you listen to the content, this song is really upbeat for Joni.
Oh, it is. It's very quirky and bouncy, and it's.
But this is also on this particular record, and I don't know if you're going to rank it, but I'm going to say this is. Well, she's starting to get away from that folky stuff.
Yeah,
and she's starting to get more of that jazz influence because a lot of these arrangements on here are much more jazzy. And you got Max Bennett on bass, Larry Carlton's on this record. Yes. And we all know that he played with her a long time, and Joe Sample's playing keyboards. So this is where things are starting to change. But it's a wonderful song. Got to number 7.
I love that song. That's one of my favorites. I really like it a lot.
Big hit
song. Yeah.
So if you like commercial Joni, this is about as commercial as you're going to get. But it's a great song. Whenever it's on, I listen to it. So that would be, what was my number 8? All right, my number 7. Okay, here we go. We're going to go back to 1969 off the album Clouds, Chelsea Morning. And this is, this is not a song about relationships. This is a song about her experiences in New York City, living in Chelsea neighborhood. It's just like the day-to-day life. Sunlight coming in. It's very positive. It's very up. But it's great production. And that's another thing, Pete, I want to mention about a lot of these records, especially those jazz albums and Blue. The production on her records are always stunning. I can't think of a bad sounding album.
You feel like you're in the studio there with them, right? I mean, it's just,
especially Blue. And this is a good example because, like we mentioned, the stripped down production of a lot of these songs, which just helps. It's not all cluttered. But this song is also incredible because you've got Stephen Stills playing bass. Now, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Stephen Stills played all the bass on that. He recorded all the backgrounds. He did the bass, he did the keyboards, he did all those guitars. He basically created it in the studio. And if you know Stephen Stills, no people really talk about his bass playing, but he's absolutely, well, he's brilliant anyway. But his bass playing is great. And the instrumentation on this song is very simple, but his bass playing stands out. It takes center stage. Wonderful track. I love it. I never get tired of it. And like I've said before, a lot of these tracks I can play and I will never turn them off because not like I hear them a lot, but these songs are so great and it crosses over to the whole album. So
yeah, for sure.
That's great. So that's my number 7.
Ooh. All right, my number 6.
6.
My number 6 album. Speaking of the jazz period, this is the last one of her jazz-oriented albums. This is Mingus.
Yeah.
So, Mingus right? It's the 10th album, last for Asylum Records. So this album, she was planning on doing a whole record with Charles Mingus, legendary, jazz player, legend, absolute legend. And, who better to work with in a jazz run of albums than the man himself. But unfortunately, in the middle of them co-writing and working on stuff, he passed away, right? So she decided to continue on with the album in memory of him, and pulled in a lot of players who had played with Mingus before or who were familiar, played his music, right? So Jocko's on here, Wayne Shorter's on here, Herbie Hancock's on here, Peter Erskine, Don Elias, Emil Richards. I mean, all these great players.
Yeah.
And it's a mix of like some Joni originals, some Mingus standards, and some stuff that they worked on together. I think it's a fabulous album. God Must Be a Boogeyman is a cool acoustic guitar piece. I mean, you got Jocko's bass is just exploding and Joni's playful vocals. Great song. A Chair in the Sky's got great sax from Wayne Shorter. You got Herbie's electric piano. Jocko's kind of lumbering in and out of the mix. Fantastic stuff. Joni adding all sorts of great acoustic guitar sections on other songs on here, like The Wolf That Lives in Lindsay. Great song. A really cool version of Goodbye Pork Pie Hat is on here as well, because you got to have that. And she adds vocals to it, like lyrics to it. Awesome. Really good stuff. And you got the whole crew playing on that one. So yeah, this is a really good album for those who like the jazzier stuff from her. So that's my number 6.
I want to make a comment on that record because this was kind of got a lot of mixed reviews. Because think about it, we're in her jazz. You've got the more she kept going down that road, the more these records kind of get further out.
Yeah,
this is very experimental.
Very experimental. I think a lot of the jazz purists didn't like it either. That's the problem, because even though she's trying to do more of this jazz stuff, those hardcore old school jazz people are probably like, why is this folky doing the jazz stuff or trying to do jazz? But I think it's a brilliant little album. Really good.
Yeah, it's really something. It's not that accessible, ladies and gentlemen.
No, it's really
if
not.
You're looking, it's really out there, but it's got a lot to offer.
Yeah,
I don't think I would recommend anybody just jumping on this one first.
No, not unless you're already a jazz fan and you're just mildly interested in what Joni Mitchell did in her career. Then I would say, yeah, give this a try. But if you're not all that much into jazz and you maybe like a little bit of pop and folk and stuff like that, and you're looking to get into Joni Mitchell for the first time, don't get this one. Don't get this one or Don Juan. Those are not the ones to start with by any means. Hejira's that's kind of a different.
That's a different story.
Yeah. Or you can go for this one, my number 5, which is For the Roses from 1972. Great cover. She's got her sitting above. It almost looks like somewhere in New York, but I'm not sure where it's from. Obviously, it's probably from,
I don't know,
from Laurel Canyon area or something like that. So this is her 5th album, 1972. So here, like I mentioned before, we talked about her. The other album is about her relationship with Graham Nash. This is all about her failing relationship with Mr. Taylor, James Taylor, who of course is in the throes of heroin addiction. She's trying to take care of him, and then he just like famously dumps her, and she's absolutely devastated, right? It's like, oh God, I feel bad. Of course, what does he do? He goes and hooks up with Carly Simon right afterwards, right? So
Mm.
And then she gets stuck with him and his problems, right? So it's yeah, but you got this wonderful song, Banquet. And I think Banquet is a really interesting. I'm not much of a lyric guy, but it's almost like
Mhm.
impossible to listen to her music and not hear these stories that she's telling. So
Mhm.
this Banquet is all about how people in times of need turn to certain things in their life to help strengthen them. And she mentioned like people turn to heroin and people turn to Jesus and all that sort of thing. Very, very interesting story. You have to wonder if a lot of this is autobiographical, right? Cold
Ah,
Blue Steel and Sweet
yeah.
Fire. It's got Tom Scott. Got to mention Tom Scott on sax on these jazzy albums. This is the beginning of that whole period. He's amazing on here. Baron Grill is quirky. Got Tom Scott on that again. Let the Wind Carry Me. Great acoustic guitar work on this album. And I think for me, whereas you have Jocko on some of the following albums, who's kind of the star of the show alongside her, I think on the albums before Jocko gets involved, Tom Scott on sax is kind of the guy who's really starting to show, what he's all about. And then Larry Carlton comes in, right? So you got these great players here. But yeah, excellent album. My number five.
Excellent.
Back to you.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna go with my number six. I'm gonna go with a track off of Blue from 1971, which already says my favorite. I could pull a lot of songs off of here. I'm gonna go with the opening track, All I Want. Again, we're talking, it's very emotional. It's about love, about connection. That's an ongoing theme in her catalog. It's very stripped down. Joni's voice is very upfront. It's very intimate. The thing about the Blue album that I like, it's very intimate. It's like you're sitting there with Joni, but she's playing hammered. I think it was the Appalachian dulcimer. So she's different show, but she's playing dulcimer, playing acoustic guitar, and it's just very one of the last folk influence things. It's just incredible. Lyrics are great, but it's so catchy. See, a lot of this stuff, like on Blue, there's strong melodies. Now, would this be a hit on the top 40? No, it's not commercial, but it still has a lot of commercial commercial aspects, I think. But I think it's a great opening track. I love the chord progressions on it. I think it's an absolutely stunning track. And I don't think that's really on too many lists. I don't know, but I think it's one of her greatest songs. And it's just raw, it's honest, it's beautiful. I love it. So that's my number six. Now we're getting this. Now we get to my top five. Coyote is my number five.
Oh, yeah, so good.
Ujira, 1976.
Coyotes.
It's a narrative, you know, talks about wanderlust, human relationships again. It's all going back and forth. But this was also written about a failed relationship. She was in a relationship with Sam Shepard, the actor, and it falls apart. So now we get this record. But we've also got, you still have some folk here, but it's
Yeah.
just interlaced with jazz. You've got Jocko on here. In fact, I think on this track got Jocko, Larry Carlton, Max Bennett does play some bass, but I think Max Bennett's on here as well, but primarily Jocko. So we've got two bass players for the most part. Um, it's great. She did a version of this song on the last waltz with the band, and top notch. It's just a wonderful track. The chord progressions, the way it gets in that minor key. I mean, it's just her key changes in general on these songs is absolutely stunning. And
It's also
yes,
on this live album, and she's got Jocko and Pat Metheny playing on it. Amazing.
killer.
Amazing.
And them playing live, there's some videos out on YouTube, and I don't know if it's from that show or what, but there's
Yeah, they
the
recorded this.
video with
There's
Pat.
a whole video of this concert. Yeah,
Okay, maybe I've seen clips of it,
yeah,
but you
it's
have
great.
to admit, holy crap.
Yeah,
Check this out, ladies and gentlemen. We're here just trying to turn you on to stuff. If you don't know this catalog, then you're a jazz fan. Check out that jazz era, for
yeah.
God's sakes.
I
It's
would
so
say
good.
Coyote is an easy recommendation for anybody.
It's
Yeah,
just so beautiful.
yeah,
And that album, we haven't talked about that album, but just the atmospheric effect. And I mentioned the chord progressions. It's just something about the tonality of that record. It almost just cries out to you. You know what I mean? It's just something about that record. I don't. Hopefully, it's up high in your list. I have no idea, but I love it.
I
So that
think
would be
you will
my
be
number
pleasantly
five.
surprised. Pleasantly surprised.
All right.
All right, my number four, I was actually surprised by this one. Because I think this is probably her last really, really good album. From 1982. Wild Things Run Fast. So
Mhm.
again, her 11th album. This is Joni basically leaving the 70s behind, moving into the 80s. It's got much, much more of a 80s pop rock sound, but I think it really works. And there's some great people on here. Steve Lukather from Toto's on here, playing some
Yeah.
great guitar, electric guitar. Michael Landau, another great electric guitar player. John Guerin's on drums, who worked with her through much of the 70s. Larry Carlton's on here. Wayne Shorter's on here. Lionel Richie does some backing vocals and does a co-lead vocal with her on one track. Russell Ferrante, Vinnie Colaiuta, James Taylor, new husband Larry Klein, who I will say, it's almost like, because he also plays bass and he co-produces a good chunk of her 80s stuff. It's almost like she so liked working with Jocko that she told her new husband, I need you to play like that, because you hear all these kind of Jocko-ish things on this album from
Mhm.
Larry Klein,
Mhm.
which is really weird, but that works with her music.
Yeah.
Um, it's got Chinese Cafe / Unchained Melody, just good jazzy pop. Wild Things Run Fast is a rocker. You got Lukather coming in doing all these wild guitar things. I'm like, holy shit, on a Joni Mitchell album? Rock on a Joni Mitchell album. I like that. Ladies Man is kind of breezy. Moon of the Window is kind of this jazzy pop thing. But what's missing on this album are all those acoustic guitar textures, but she still kind of has a little bit of that hanging on a little bit. You Dream Flat Tires is awesome. And again, Larry Klein's doing all these cool Jocko things, which I think is awesome. Underneath the Streetlight is a really memorable rock song. And then Wayne Shorter does his thing on Love, the final track on here. Just really good stuff on here. I didn't expect to like this one as much, but I think this is her bringing in the 80s and transitioning in a really nice way. Unfortunately, we'll kind of come off the rails from this on the next album, but I think there's enough of what we love about Joni in the 70s on this album, and this is really the last one. So yeah, that's my number four. And my number three is, bear with me a second, find my notes here, is this album, which is a really, really good one, Court and Spark,
Oh
1974.
yeah.
Sixth album. Again, this, you could arguably say this is the first full on jazz pop folk album. Right? This, you got Tom Scott on here, Joe Sample's on here, Larry Carlin's on here, Max Bennett's on here, Joe Guerin, that's basically the band. Lots of guest stars. This reached #2 in the US, #1 in Canada. She is Canadian. I don't think we talked about that. She is Canadian. And this went double platinum. I think this might be her biggest seller. I think something like that. Title,
Well, at least the single would be. It might be her biggest
yeah,
seller as a
could
record,
be.
probably.
Title track is great. We talked about Help Me. Fantastic song. It's just so dreamy and airy and quirky and catchy. Free Man in Paris. Got some great electric guitar from, I believe, Larry Carlton on that one. What else? The Same Situation is great. You got Wayne Perkins is also on this album. He had some cool guitar to Car on a Hill, where he's him and Tom Scott are doing this kind of back and forth thing, which is really good. Robbie Robertson's on Raised on Radio. He's adding some guitar on that. Larry Carlton really shines on Just This Train. He's doing some funky chords and like these volume swells. That's the interesting thing about his work with Joni. He's not doing his typical stuff that he would do on his solo albums or with the Crusaders or with Steely Dan, but he uses like volume swells and these like little compy chords and things like that. And it really works well alongside of all of her acoustic guitar textures. So Trouble Child is really good. This is a really good album, really good album. So I would not sleep on this one. It says featuring her hits Raised on Robbery, Help Me, and Free Man in Paris. All great songs. So Court and Spark, it's my number three.
All right, I have a quick question. What do you think about Wild Things Run Fast as far as where it is in her catalog? Do you think that possibly, with Mingus, she took it as far as she could go and or signing to a new label? Geffen, how David Geffen was always unhappy with what Neil, Geffen wanted hits.
Yeah.
Neil just totally rebelled. But Joni, this is a lot. Wild Things Run Fast is a lot more accessible than, well,
This
since the
this
album
is
you just talked about.
this is really accessible. but I think it still retains enough of the Joni Mitchell identity, whereas the album that comes after this from '85 is barely recognizable as a Joni Mitchell album. It could have been a
It,
Cyndi Lauper album, Doggy Dog. It could have been a Cyndi Lauper album. It could have been any number of female synth pop stars at the
mhm,
time. Whereas this still sounds like Joni Mitchell to me. I like this. I think this is really good. I would have rather have heard another couple of albums in this vein
mhm.
rather than the deep going into the going into the weeds into synth pop and like '80s overproduced schlock that she got started on the next album. And it's not that the next album is awful, but it's just it doesn't sound like Joni Mitchell at all to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. I think she probably took the jazz thing as far as she could go
I think so. Yeah,
too.
she beat it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because you know
Yeah.
what, Grant? In the '80s, nobody's going to listen to that stuff. Sad. That's
Yeah, we're talking a different era.
yeah,
It's a different era and the record industry has changed.
yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I agree. But fascinating either way. All right, my number four. I'm gonna go with another track from we are at four, right?
Yep.
Hmm. All right. I'm gonna go with a track off Ladies from the Canyon, 1970. I know I've been picking a lot of stuff. It's all early to mid 70s, but God, I just think that that's the sweet spot
Hey,
for
that's
great
yeah.
songwriting. I'm gonna go with the track Circle Game.
Mm.
This is a track, if I haven't really talked about it, but well, we have. I talked about Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. A lot of people covered her stuff. This was also one of those songs that people covered. Tom Rush did a version of it, but this is a song that she was influenced by Sugar Mountain by Neil Young because that song's about, the loss of youth, reflecting back a way things used to be. And this is exactly what this is about. Just talking about life, the stages of life and how things change. It's a beautiful song, Pete. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
She produced this. Again, you've got Joni vocals, guitar, Stephen Stills on bass. Absolutely great stuff. James Taylor doing some acoustic guitar on it. Wonderful. Um, there's a lot of different other musicians on here as she started to use more and more people on these records, but Steven still shines and well, James Taylor too.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
might as well give him some props because he's a great flap top player. You cannot deny that. So it's a great track. It's a beautiful melody. Wonderful.
Isn't it
Um,
amazing how all these like you talk about these like scenes in different
yeah.
parts of the country where people get together and they collaborate and like I don't think that the Laurel Canyon scene really gets enough credit for being a hotbed for all these people collaborating and living with each other and getting into relationships with each other and creating these songs and these albums. It's like the New York scene, San Francisco scene, the Texas, the San Antonio scene or the Nashville scene. I mean, there was a Laurel Canyon scene there for a number of years back then.
Yeah, yeah, it was great. I don't know what kind of scenes there now, but it's definitely
I don't
not the way
know,
it
right?
used to
It's I
be.
mean back then, they were all doing acid and smoking pipe,
Yeah.
and just living with each other, and just doing the hippie Laurel Canyon thing, and it spawned a lot of music, and it gets mentioned all the time when you talk about a lot of these bands from this era,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah,
So
good stuff.
yeah,
All right, my number three, I'm going to go with Amelia off of Hygeria from 1976. We've talked a lot about this record.
yeah.
We haven't even ranked this record
Oh,
anywhere,
it's
but
coming.
but we have talked about it.
It's coming.
And then again, a lot of this record has a lot of her, a lot of self-discovery, a lot of, loneliness on this. It's very solemn, very uh there's just something about the tonality of this record that I absolutely love the production of it. Again, we've got more jazz, but the chord progression on this, Pete, and the chorus and the melody is so oh, it's just wonderful. I love this. But this is about Amelia Earhart. She's trying to put herself in her shoes. She disappeared over the Pacific in 1937. It's great. So she's drawing parallels between her life, Amelia's life. Joni's very deep,
Yeah.
very deep. I'm not really a lyric guy, but on her stuff, you really almost step, if you're not a lyric guy or female, you kind of look at the stuff and you kind of take it in because the lyrics are very important in her music. And she just sounds great. I could listen to this. Well, actually, I could listen to this whole album over and over again. It's so brilliant. And then again, I've talked about it, but Jocko's on this track. Larry Carlton. And he has a lot to do. Larry has a lot to do with the way this whole track sounds because it's very atmospheric, the way he plays it. So Victor Feldman playing vibes.
Yeah.
Come on, kids.
We
You
needed
need
to hear
check
more
it
of him on this album, I think, because his contributions are slim, but yeah, it's
out. Slim, but great. So
yeah.
that would be my number 3.
Cool. All right. All right, top 2 albums. Here we go, folks. Number 2 is The Hissing of Summer Lawns, 1975, 7th album. So here she's really pushing the jazz and pop thing even further. This is right in the middle of this whole period. And another good one, Robin Ford's on guitar. Yes. Larry Carlton's on guitar. Yes. Jeff Skunk Baxter's on guitar. Yes. No, it's not a Steely Dan album. No, it's not a Yellow Jackets album. It's a Joni Mitchell album. Victor Feldman on keyboards. Max Bennett's here. Wilton Felder's here. And again, one thing I do want to mention, because I wanted to mention on one of the other albums. So this is right before Jocko joins up with her. Mm-hmm. Listen to Wilton Felder's bass on this record. I think that Joni really liked what he was doing here, using bass in such a much more prominent, almost lead way, that she liked this, but decided that she probably heard Jocko doing stuff with Weather Report or with Pat Metheny, and she's like, oh, he does this kind of style even better. Let me get him into the band. Because I think when you listen to Felder's stuff on this album and the other album that came right before it, you can totally see that transition into working with Jocko. I think she had this vision of how the bass should sound in these type of back arrangements, right? And who better than to get this young whippersnapper guy, Jocko Pastorius, who everybody's talking about. So I think it's just really interesting to listen to all these albums like in succession, and then kind of hear the evolution of the whole Jocko aspect of it. I think is really, really interesting. Anyway, who else? James Taylor's on here. Joe Sample's on here. Crosby, and Nash are on here. In France, They Kiss on Main Street is just a great jazzy pop song. You got Skunk and Robin Ford dueling guitars. I mean, these two guys are amazing, and here you got them in this. I mean, it's just so good. It's so good. She doesn't. I don't think we talk a lot about guys like Frank Zappa and Miles Davis and others who, throughout their careers, they bring in all these great players and get them to do great things, and then they unleash them out into the world to go do their own stuff. I think you got to throw Joni Mitchell into this conversation a little bit, because she did this all throughout the 70s. Brought in all these players, and then they became even more famous and went on and did their own thing. What else? Jungle Line is great on here. Edith and the Kingpin, again, got more of those cool lead bass lines, which from Felder, which Jocko would then take and run with. What else? Carlton's great on that. Don't Interrupt the Sorrow is a great kind of jazzy folk piece, very wispy. It's got that wispy quality. The title track is amazing. Joni's great guitar work on there. This is a really, really, really good album. Could be my number 1, but it's not. Because you know why, Grant?
I can't imagine what your number 1 is, but I'm
Hajira
guessing.
Is number 1. That's why. Because Hajira, the 8th album from 1976, this has to be number 1.
I get it.
And this to me is the pinnacle of her jazzy folk pop period, because it's got all of the above in it. Jocko's on bass, Carlton's on guitar, Joe Guerin, very underrated drummer, played with her throughout this whole period. Chuck Finley, Abel Most, Tom Scott's here back on horns and reeds and stuff, and a few others. But Jocko just makes such a kind of statement on this album. I mean, Coyote is a brilliant song. I mean, he's doing all this harmonics and lead lines, and it's just like every time you turn around, he's doing all this stuff, and you're like, wow. And it just works so well alongside her lush acoustic guitar patterns and whatnot. It's just absolutely brilliant. I mean, and you got Amelia, Larry's all over that one. That's so good. Furry Sings the Blues is really cool. I like that one a lot. It's kind of like got this like heartland bluesy jazzy type thing going on, really good. And that song reminds me of the Pat Metheny group. Get rid of the vocals and just look at the arrangement, like Pat Metheny group from the same time period. Very, very cool. Title track, as you mentioned, is this dense kind of awesome song. Jocko's just doing his thing. Joni's vocals are just kind of like floating in and out of the mix. Great, great song. Song for Sharon is another great one. I mean, there's really not a bad song in there. That's almost 9 minutes long. Black Crow is good. Refuge from the Roads, all longer tracks. A lot going on here. The arrangements are great. The instrumental ensemble work is great. Everybody's putting in their solos, but nobody's showboating. It's a killer album. And absolutely, I almost wish, because the band is so great on this and such a part of the album, I almost wish we got to see the band somewhere on the album, because it's almost like its greatness is because of everybody that contributed here. Even though it's a Joni Mitchell album, sure, but I almost wish she like kind of had everybody listed somewhere. Not listed, but pictures of them.
But predominant, like an actual bit, like if they were
Like a
her actual band.
Because it feels like a band. That's why this feels like a band album, not just a collection of 30 musicians, right? This feels like a band. And like I said, she basically takes this framework of what's going on with this album and the album after, and she takes it on the road as an actual band for the Shadows and Light live album. And this feels like the culmination of everything that was going on with her up to that point. So yeah, Hijira, easy number one. That I knew that was number one going in. And then as I went and re-listened to this whole catalog and I was re-listening to that album, like, oh man, this album is good. Even if you don't really care for her as an artist or anything like that, but you like kind of like jazz, really good jazz music and pop music, go listen to Hijira. And even the proggers out there watching, go listen to Hijira. There's a lot of really intricate stuff going on in this album that I think will appeal to you.
I mean, especially if you're like a musician, this is a record that musicians could listen to and get something out of.
Yeah.
Whether Joni, you're a fan of Joni or not, you cannot deny that she is absolutely brilliant and was able to bring these, like you said, she helped a lot of these other artists find more of a mainstream audience to some degree, even though this is not mainstream stuff by any means, ladies and gentlemen. This is serious music, but you really can't classify it. There's really not really anything else quite like it, because you think, oh well, we're in jazz and we've got jazz musicians like Stan. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not anything like Steely Dan, so but there's a lot here for, especially if, well, there's a lot here for anybody, but like you said, we're just trying to turn you on to it. Please check it out, because I'm just captivated with their catalog. All right, my number two. All right, I'm gonna go with we're gonna go to the album Clouds from 1969, her second album. If anybody has been following this conversation, we know how fast Joni has progressed through her career, how she's growing. It's like, okay, it's kind of like the Beatles. Every Beatle album grows on top of the other Beatle album. In one album, you're going from album to album to album, and they're just growing by leaps and bounds. You get this with Joni Mitchell. And this is her second album, but she has grown so much from her first album. And there's nothing wrong with that first album. David Crosby produced it. Great record. I have no problem with it. But Clouds was a pretty big leap. Yeah, we're still doing the folk thing. But the song that I picked off of Clouds is Both Sides Now, which Collins, Julie Collins.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, she did a cover
Julie
of
Collins
it.
Young? Yeah, Julie Collins Young.
Yeah. No. Who am I talking about? Oh, crap. Whatever. Used to be Stephen Still's girlfriend. Oh, the brain, ladies and gentlemen. The brain. This is our second.
We got the olds.
But anyway, there was a remake. Please in the comment let me know who it was, because I know who it is, but the brain. Anyway, great song. One of her early hits. In fact, it got more the reissue or the cover version. Judy Collins.
Judy Collins, yes.
Oh, the brain, Pete. Did a cover of it in 68. So she produced it. She did a version of it first, but then Joni did a version of her own. Nothing wrong with the Judy Collins version at all, but I do like the Joni treatment because it's still so intimate, But Collins got up to the top 10, so it's great. Frank Sinatra did a version. Of course, Diana Ross did a version. People like this song. It's a great pop song. And it's engaging. The lyrics are wonderful. It talks about life, love, the same topic she's talked about through her whole freaking
career,
life. It's just more of it. But the melody is top notch. It's so catchy. And her vocals on here just hits you right in the back. Hits me right here. Hits me right in the back of my neck. I love it. So that's my number two. My number one, which I think is the most incredible track that she's ever done, from the album Blue 1971, A Case of You. Oh my God. The lyrics. She even throws in Oh Canada in there on this song. But it's that dulcimer, just I love the dulcimer. It's very intimate. It's just her singing the track, you know. It's just more about relationships, you know. In fact, I think it's talking about a relationship that's past, but that relationship is probably about Graham Nash because a lot of this is about Graham Nash.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's beautiful. A lot of people have covered it. Prince has covered it. James Blake, Tori Amos. I mean, I could go on and on. James Taylor. This is like her trademark song. It was never a hit. It's an album, but it's so emotional, so hard hitting, so intimate. It's like you're getting right into Joni's soul. It's absolutely stunning. That's my number one. This would have always been my number one. Uh, my top three tracks are my top three tracks, but it just goes to show you, Pete, great records, great singles,
Yeah.
a great catalog. So, however you stack it up, if you're ranking the albums, you're ranking the tracks. This is one of those artists that encapsulates, and you can easily do it, even though her catalog is so vast and it's just a stunning catalog. And, you know, musicians know she is so great. So, if you haven't heard it, check it out.
And you know, we didn't even mention the song. I didn't mention it when I was talking about the album, and it didn't make your top 10 of songs. But Big Yellow Taxi is another terrific song.
Yeah. It's great. I see you to do 10 Joni tracks is
Hard, right?
impossible.
Yeah, it's hard.
I like that track. I don't have a problem with it, but there are other tracks that I like better.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, right?
And
Yeah.
it's the whole, it's just my list. You can tell me I'm wrong down in the comments, but this
I
is
think at
just
the
my list
time, I
for
think
today.
Big
Could
Yellow
change.
Taxi was a little different for her, right? That's a little
Mhm.
quirky, more pop, right? In the middle of her kind of like folk
Yeah,
period.
that's 1972.
Yeah, it's
Not
really
not
early.
19 not 1972, but 1972.
Yeah, yeah.
So, well,
Well,
yeah. So that's pretty early.
thinking about taxis and parking lots and stuff, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that would be LA.
Yeah, exactly, right, exactly. So
But
there you have it, everybody. Ranking the top 10 albums of Joni Mitchell and the top 10 songs of Joni Mitchell all in one episode.
why
So for
not?
those of you who are fans, try to tackle this little assignment down in the comments below. Let us know what you think of her best songs and her best albums, and we'll see what you come up with. And we'll see you next time here on Ranking the Albums. Grant and I will be back in a couple of weeks doing this once again. Are we going to do JoJo Gunn next?
If you want to do JoJo Gunn, I'm
That's four
game.
albums, right? I think we could do that.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah. We might do JoJo Gunn. Some of you are probably watching. Who the hell is JoJo Gunn? Well, if you're a Spirit fan, I'm sure you probably know who JoJo Gunn was. This was Jay Ferguson's and
Mark Andes.
Mark Andy's band after they left Spirit. They did a few albums as JoJo Gunn. So we talked about doing that. We also have Black Oak, Arkansas on the to-do list. That's a little bit of a bigger dive.
Oh,
So
that's
yeah, that's down the road a little ways, but we will do that. We did talk about doing Mark Farner as well, and I think we've had some people ask, and I think you and I briefly talked about a while ago. We may want to do Earth, Wind, and Fire at some point.
oh, we could do that easy.
Yeah, I think that would be lots of fun. I think so.
People have also mentioned Little River Band. They've mentioned, I don't know. The list is so long. I don't know if we can get through it.
Yeah,
But I don't know when we will do Black Oak, Arkansas, because that is quite a extensive catalog, and I'm coming into it kind of green.
yeah, we both are. We both
Yeah,
are.
so
I
we
know
have
a
to
couple of the
digest it.
albums, but yeah, it's like I bought a whole bunch of them, so I have them, but it's just there's so much going on. It's a big catalog, so that may
Yeah.
be a top 10 type of thing. Also, we'll see. So
Well,
that's
we'll
coming. It's
see.
coming, folks. Be patient. Be patient. We will get to
Yeah.
Black Oak, Arkansas at some point. So, Grant, what's coming up on the Warehouse and the Contrarian?
Oh, what is coming up on the Warehouse? Ah, geez. I don't have my book in front of me, and I live by the seat of my pants, and I really don't know.
Okay.
But on the Contrarians, I know what's going on. We just put up a show last night where we looked at Iron Maiden, That just premiered last night. Check that out. That was a good, fun show. And then we do the live chat on Wednesdays. But in the warehouse, we're always going live. We're always doing stuff. And I don't know. But I do know this. I will say this. This Sunday, there is a listening party at 8 p.m. Eastern time where I have a guest and we're going to be we're doing a 60s one, playing 60s tracks, a lot of mid 60s music. So I haven't done that in the warehouse, so that'll be fun. And then I will be having Pete back in the warehouse, and we will be doing yet part 2 of our Yacht Rock show.
That's right. What's the date on that again? That's coming up.
I don't have my book. It's the end of this month. We're getting close.
I think it's a week from Sunday.
Week from Sunday.
Yes.
So tune in because that'll be fun. We'll do 2 hours of Yacht Rock, and it's all about turning you on to stuff. That's all it is.
So you need an additional list for me, or are we just going to use what we did, try and get what we didn't use last time? Because I think
I could take what I didn't use and build off of that.
Yeah, I think so. If you need any additional stuff, let me know. I can probably think of some stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
I usually have to have about 15 take or give because you don't know. We're doing that show live and we talk in between, and you don't really know how things are going to time out.
Yeah,
So
I know.
you're just winging it.
Yeah.
It's a game, but it's fun. So look forward to that.
Yeah. So so what's coming up here on the channel? Let's see, we got Hudson Valley Squares tomorrow. What is ranking the albums next week? I honestly don't know. I would have to consult my list. I don't know if I have anything set in stone next week. I might be doing a solo ranking next week, but I'm not sure. Might be Anthrax next week. I gotta take a look. Or maybe
you don't have your calendar.
No, it's on my desktop, but I don't want to get into it. I'm like, yeah, I gotta move stuff around and everything. But it's either gonna be that or it might be Simon Phillips Protocol. I don't know, one of the two. So we'll see. I have to figure it out. So anyway, but there will be a show next week. You can guarantee that, and we'll have JoJo Gunn from the two of us in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together, all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as a post. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Remember, down in the comments, let us know what you think of Joni Mitchell, your favorite albums, your favorite songs. And we'll see you next time here on Ranking the Albums. For Grant, Arthur, I am Pete Pardo. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
See ya.